Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast where history, mystery, and reality collide. You know, this particular episode is fascinating because it is part of a whole ritualistic sort of thing that happens in all religions, but the Catholic Church has a lot of rituals, and this is one of the ones that is very notable.
Yes, today's episode takes us deep inside the ancient halls of the Vatican. It's a place of prayer, of power, and even today, exorcism.
Exorcism today. Yeah, that's right. Behind its ornate chapels and papal apartments, the Vatican employs real exorcists, priests specially trained to combat what the church believes are literal demonic forces. We're not talking about horror movie fiction. We're talking about sanctioned official rites. The Catholic Church's real response to what they classify as possession.
And this is not just some medieval holdover, ladies and gentlemen. As recently as 2022, the Vatican reaffirmed the need for trained exorcists worldwide. There's even a Vatican endorsed exorcism training course held annually in Rome.
Yeah, let's start with the basics. Exorcism, from the Greek exorzein, meaning to bind by oath, is the ritual act of driving out demons. The Catholic Church has been performing exorcisms since its earliest centuries.
The first official rite goes back to the 4th century, but it was Pope Innocent I, around the year 400 AD, who formally recognized the practice. Exorcisms appear in the writings of St. Augustine and later were codified in medieval manuals like the Rituale Romanum, the Roman ritual, in 1614.
That ritual remained unchanged until the year 1999, when the Vatican issued a new version. Why? Because cases were increasing. And the old rites didn't address the psychological complexities and findings and sciences and complexities in modern cases.
This new rite was designed by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the future Pope Benedict XVI, and it emphasized discernment. It reminds priests that exorcism should be a last resort. Not every affliction is demonic. Most cases will require medical or psychological help.
Now let's meet one of the church's most famous modern exorcists, Father Gabriel Amorth.
Yes, Father Amorth was the chief exorcist of Rome for over 30 years. He claimed to have performed over 70,000 exorcisms before his death in 2016.
70,000?
Yes, indeed, although he clarified most of them were simple prayers or minor blessings. Still, many were intense. In one 1997 interview, he said, "The devil is a pure spirit. He speaks all languages and understands all things. When I confront him, he knows who I am."
I think that he was perhaps one of the inspirations for that famous movie, The Exorcist. Do you think that's right?
I believe so. I had a priest friend who also did exorcisms, and he knew him personally. And he said he was the inspiration for the older priest in the story.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. There you go. And I actually saw the house that's in Georgetown, part of Washington, D.C. Saw the house where that was filmed. And it is sort of interesting. Anyhow, getting back to this, he also said that he being Amorth, also said that he encountered levitation, superhuman strength, and people vomiting metal or speaking ancient languages that they had no way of knowing.
Now, skeptics and even many psychologists will dismiss these things as symptoms of suggestibility of mental illness, and we'll explore that. But for Amorth and many others, it was clear possession is rare but real.
So, how does a priest become an exorcist? There is a specific process.
Only a bishop can appoint a priest to be an exorcist. The priest must be upright, wise, and trained, no younger than 45 years old, and be trained not just in theology, but in psychiatry, medicine, and all aspects of spiritual discernment.
There's even a Vatican affiliated training course held each spring at the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum in Rome. Hundreds of priests attend, even from Protestant denominations, too.
During the course, they study case studies, observe actual sessions, and learn how to distinguish between true demonic possession, mental illness, and cultural misinterpretations.
And there's a purportedly rigorous checklist before a real exorcism is approved. The priest must rule out schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, drug induced psychosis, neurological disorders. And only when those natural explanations are exhausted does the church proceed.
That seems sensible. You don't want to approve every problem to a demonic influence. Let's dramatize one case. It's been anonymized, but was reported by Father Morth himself.
Yeah, in this, here we go. A young woman, 22, arrives at the church of San Giovanni. She's pale, trembling. Her family says she hasn't eaten in days. She wakes screaming, speaks in guttural voices, and when the priest sprinkles holy water, she convulses violently. During the ritual, her voice changes, masculine, ancient sounding. She names the sins of the exorcist. She levitates slightly from the chair. For hours she screams and thrashes as prayers are read aloud. Exorcio toi mata spiritus in nomine Jesu Christi. Then silence. The woman collapses, exhausted. The priest, drenched in sweat, makes the sign of the cross. That night, she sleeps peacefully for the first time in weeks.
That's chilling, Dr. Weaver. Father Morth described hundreds of such cases, and while we must certainly be cautious with dramatization, his reports were consistent over the decades.
Of course, not everyone believes these events are truly supernatural.
You're quite correct. Many psychiatrists argue that these experiences fall under known mental disorders, particularly dissociative states, trauma responses, or even mass hysteria.
In fact, Dr. Richard Gallagher, a Yale and Princeton trained psychiatrist, is one of the few medical professionals who does believe in possession. He was called by clergy to consult on unusual cases. He said, I've seen patients suddenly speak perfect Latin, levitate, or identify hidden secrets of others in the room.
Dr. Gallagher believes 99% of these cases are psychiatric, but that 1%, he calls them the real thing.
But mainstream medicine remains cautious. The DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, avoids religious language but recognizes the cultural bound syndromes that resemble possession. suggesting they may be psychological, not spiritual.
One of the unfortunate side effects of a belief in possession is that it sometimes has led to abuse. There are documented cases where children or mentally ill adults were subject to harmful exorcisms, and some even died.
That's why the Vatican now urges strict oversight. Only authorized priests may perform exorcism, and only with the consent and with medical support.
Yet, in spite of everything, the demand has grown. In Italy alone, the number of trained exorcists grew from about 15 in the 1980s to over 250 today.
Yeah, one Vatican official noted in 2020 there is a real spiritual hunger. People are seeking help, and the church must respond responsibly. Um, Personally, I wonder if the increase is due to some other things rather than, yes, I think it is a cry for help. And yes, I think that that happens. And, people are wanting miracles today.
Absolutely.
While the Vatican might be the most famous face of formal exorcism, it's far from the only one. Around the world, across continents and creeds, the belief in possession and spiritual expulsion is surprisingly common.
That's right. Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, even some indigenous African and Protestant traditions, they all have their own version of exorcism, and each reflects that religion's deeper cosmology, its ideas about the soul, evil, and what it means to be made whole again.
Let's start with Judaism. In Jewish mysticism, a person may be possessed by a dibuk, the unsettled soul of a dead person, sometimes malevolent.
Rabbis trained in the Orthodox tradition and the Kabbalah have been known to perform quiet rituals to expel dybbuk, involving psalms, the shofar kept in a synagogue, and incantations. One of the most famous stories came from a 16th century Sabed, that means a learned elder. A rabbi named Isaac Luria reportedly performed a dybbuk exorcism that became legend.
In Islam, possession is attributed to jinn, beings made of smokeless fire. Mentioned in the Quran, possession can happen through jealousy, curses, or spiritual vulnerability.
Exorcisms in Islam are called ragia. They involve reciting Quranic verses, especially the second surah, the Surah al-Baghdad, along with special prayers and sometimes water infused with recitations. But this is extremely important. Any ritual that strays into sorcery or idolatry is considered haram or forbidden.
In Hinduism, demonic possession may be caused by bhuts or pretas, restless spirits, or in some traditions, beings called rakshasas or asuras.
Rituals can include the recitation of mantras, fire offerings, or invoking fierce deities like Kali or Hanuman, the monkey god. In rural areas, spiritual leaders, sometimes healers, sometimes known as tantrics, perform these exorcisms with a mix of Sanskrit invocations and ritualistic offerings.
In Tibetan Buddhism, the concept of possession is more psychological, but there are exorcisms. Monks may create sand mandalas, chant mantras, or perform sacred dances called kam, meant to drive out harmful spirits or energy.
What's interesting is that these spirits aren't always seen as malevolent and evil. Sometimes they're considered confused, lost, or trapped, and thus the ritual is more about liberation for them than punishment.
The Eastern Orthodox Church also practices exorcisms, often using the Book of Needs, which contains prayers attributed to Saint Basil and Saint John Chrysostom.
Unlike Hollywood style confrontations, these rituals are often solemn and very subdued, more focused on prayer, fasting, and confession than the dramatic flair. If you're interested in more details, my friend, Father Timothy Ware's History of the Orthodox Church has a whole chapter on that.
Okay. In Shinto, the native spirituality of Japan, spirits called kami, or sometimes tsukemino, can inhabit people or objects. When a spirit becomes disruptive, priests may perform ohari, a purification ritual.
They use salt, bells, streamers, and chanting to cleanse the person or a sacred space. These ceremonies are often performed at shrines and are as much about balance as they are about banishment.
Indigenous cultures across Africa, the Americas, and Oceania have deep traditions of spirit healing and possession.
In many African traditions, for example, spirit possession is addressed through music, drumming, and dance, guided by a witch doctor or a shaman. It's often community based. I know among my Matabele and Zulu friends in South Africa, the entire village joins the ritual and they have a feast afterward and give food to the poor as Thanksgiving for their brother's release.
Yeah. In the Amazon, ayahuasca ceremonies are used not just to purge illness, but to confront spiritual intrusions.
And finally, Pentecostal and charismatic Christians regularly perform what they call deliverance, a type of exorcism.
Unlike Catholic rites, these sessions are spontaneous. They include laying on of hands, speaking in tongues, shouting commands like, "Come out in the name of Jesus." I have actually witnessed that happening in some churches. And I got to tell you, I truly feel a lot of that happens is bogus.
I've been a part of that. One particular Pentecostal preacher, one a friend of a friend, thought my cerebral palsy was caused by possession. So he proceeded to lay hands on me and say some prayers, and I'm sure it was well intended, but it's still here. Now, these kind of deliverance sessions are especially prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa, Brazil, and parts of the American South. These churches often see spiritual warfare as a part of their daily life.
Yeah, it's it's really quite fascinating. What's fascinating is how widespread and enduring these beliefs are. Whether it's jinn, dabaks, or demons, people around the world continue to turn to ritual to confront what they believe are forces beyond themselves.
And whether you believe it's psychological, spiritual, symbolic, or some connection of all three, exorcism isn't going away. It evolves with culture, but the core idea persists that evil in some form can and should be confronted and cast out. So, why does belief in possession endure, my friends? Partly because the idea of evil taking human form is deeply embedded in global culture.
And in a world where so much is uncertain, pandemics, war, social collapse, the idea of spiritual warfare becomes a way for people to make sense of suffering.
Some theologians suggest that even if demons are metaphorical, The ritual of exorcism can be psychologically cathartic, a form of spiritual healing. I could understand that.
Absolutely. And I think that that does happen. It is catharsis, and people think they are better, so they are. It's sort of like the placebo effect of some medications. It's like, okay, I've had this, so now I am free from this, whatever, controlling spirit, whatever. Maybe, just maybe, some believe there really is something out there. As Father Amorth once said, the devil is not a myth. He is a real, living being who can take over people's bodies if they let him in.
Whether you view exorcism as a form of spiritual warfare, psychological theater, or a historical relic, it remains one of the most controversial and fascinating practices in the modern church.
Yeah. So, look, thanks for joining us for this somewhat chilling exploration into the whole thing about exorcism. If you enjoyed the episode, leave us a review and keep an eye on the shadows. Bum bum bum.
Until next time, folks, stay skeptical, stay curious, and stay human. Good night.
Yeah, this has been Things You Don't Know. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Good night.